Hi, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm William, and you're watching the Wardens of the Dawn, The Road to. What I'd like to talk to you today about is I'll give you again an update on my writing. I also want to talk about a story that I got. So I had a story and it made me feel a certain way, and I wanted to explain that out here in the vlog. It's all good. So I hope you enjoy it, and let's get started. I have completed the first edit of my first book, and now I have given it over to my proofreader. And the proofreader, after reading the first chapter or so, is very excited with the story, very excited with the imagery. I look forward to getting it back and building up more with his input. So still an amazing thing to me that my life changed after the beginning of December 2024, and this whole thing opened up. And that's what I'm going to talk about with you today. I also want to announce that I've been looking at publishing options, and I'm deciding whether to go with see if I can go with a traditional publisher, if I could find one that's interested in it, or if I'm going to move forward with self-publishing. Self-publishing is much more costly on my side, and my reach will be really dependent on your help with me. So I'm thinking about that, and I will look for your comments on this post to see if you've got any ideas. If you want to share anything privately with me, also instant message me. The while my proofreader is reading my first book, I've started the second book, The Return of the Kaldar, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But it carries on in a different way from the end of the book. Okay, so now my story. I was talking with some people, and I let them know where I am, that I've given my book over to my proofreader and that I've started my second book. And they asked, "Oh, wow, how long have you been writing?" And I said, "Well, that's a very question. This project I started as of the middle of December 2024, so not very long. And it's amazing to me how fast this has been. I don't know how long a normal novelist takes to write a long novel. Um, I follow a lot of novelists in social media. They don't talk about this. They talk about their lives and their beliefs and such, and that's awesome. For me, it's not been that I'm spending all this time to create. It's more like remembering. And that's the thing. My road to the journey to these stories, and I call them stories. They were not this form before. I've been living with my whole life. When I was a 14-year-old, my parents moved to a different state, and then all of a sudden I found comic books. And before that, I was addicted to television. And I always loved superhero, science fiction, and anything with dragons. And over my life, I noticed by the things that I've read, it's always usually one of those three. And it's interesting for me. Again, when I was 14, I created a method of storing my stories, and then I built this epic adventure. And I created, at the time, what I called the Serbo Diem, a cross-section of 5 different worlds. And in the center world was Earth. And then each world had a geometric shape. So we had Earth, we had a diamond, we had a sphere, we had a diamond, we had a cylinder, we had a circle, and we had a square. And every world was a different story. And I actually, the Revolt on Prime was actually in this world this way already back when I was 14. I didn't call it Prime. My characters were still way in the infancy and trying to be developed, but I already had my villain. He is basically a zombie at that point, but now he's much, much more. And I wrote from age 14 to 18, I wrote these stories. I wrote these stories in all five of these worlds. And I had this whole structure. I had 110 characters with their powers, their traits, their persons, their dynamics, who they're aligned with. And then, of course, as I've said in my first vlog, I lost it all. I lost it all in a house fire of my family. Back then, there was no backups. I mean, it was just a pet project for me at that point, but I never knew I would not be able to get back to it until now, all these years later. But that's okay, because these stories kept creeping into my artistic activities. I can draw a little bit, I can paint a little bit. I played a guitar for a while, but I really became a storyteller. And that's because I educated myself to be a teacher, an adult teacher for adults, not for kids. Well, that's not true. I also was a karate teacher for 22 years. And there I talk to kids and I'll learn my speaking voice at that point. And that speaking voice has been very powerful when needed in my dialogues and in my humor. And I hope that you hear that when you start reading the stories. The the characters that I've developed also, I've started playing the video game City of Heroes. And in that game, you can create your own heroes and or your own villains. And some of my characters, Rick, Albert, and Everett, were all characters of mine in that game. And that's how I explored their powers. That's how I explored being them in the storyline that you run in the video game. And I really loved it. And it helped me understand better what these guys can do, should do, shouldn't do, though the dynamics of powers and interactions were all video game based. I take it away from that and I bring it into real world with my martial arts experience and my life experiences. Let's see. Another thing that I've done in my life that made me a good storyteller is to play role-playing games and become the dungeon master of a D&D group for a long time. And I've been a dungeon master at several places. And sitting once a week with your stories and then guiding these people through the game, the physical game at a table. And only your descriptions and only what you say or interact with them on is the story for them. I really got, I really think I got good at that. And so this is where my storytelling comes from. This is where my stories are. And this is why I was able to write 42,000 words in about 3.5, 4 months. And why I'm already on chapter 2 of the second book. The stories are there. I just have to tell them. And what's amazing, and I don't know, I think I've heard, I've been with a couple of authors who have said, is literally you sit down, your fingers are walking, and you're reading, you're going, where is this coming from? I don't care. I like it. I keep going. And that's the way it works for me. Authors that I've met in person, I've met David Gerald in person. Fantastic guy, fantastic. Follow him on social media, love him. David Eddings, I met him 3 times. I met him at signings up in Nevada. I've been to events where on stage I saw Isaac Asimov and Brian Anderson, um, Larry Niven, and I have a poor funny story for Larry Niven. He was selling his book at his table. No one was around. I walked up. He only had his first book on the table. I hadn't heard anything about him. And I said to him, oh, did you write this? Yeah. Is it good? Some people think so. Look at the cover. Nebula Award winner. Okay. I'm stupid. Well, can I buy one? Yeah. Can you sign it for me? I'll think about it. And then he signed me, and I got a signed book of the first book of Discworld. Amazing, but still mind-boggling for me right now that at that age and at that time, I met all these famous authors. And of course, since then, I've read a ton of stuff by all these authors. So reading is a passion. And I just want to say that the current author who's got my attention, Kyle West, and he's a self-publisher. Love his Star Sea books. Love them. Anyway, I see my time is over. I hope you've enjoyed this little chit chat, and I'll see you next week on my vlog. One thing I'd like you to consider, would you be interested, once we're done with the second rewrite of my first book, would you like me to do a live stream reading? Answer in the blog. If I get, let's do a goal. If I get 100 likes on this video, we'll look at doing that. See you in the next time. Bill out.